My sister yanked the crutch from my hand and snapped, "Quit faking aita, you're just leeching." My relatives laughed as I hit the floor. None of them realized my surgeon was right behind them. He stepped forward, touched my sister's shoulder and said 6 words that ended everything. I never imagined my own sister would try to break me. But there I was, on her patio, my leg shattered, my crutches gone, and the chilling sound of my family's laughter ringing in my ears. Then, a voice cut through the chaos, and everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning in March. I was just heading to work, minding my own business, when a pickup truck blew through a red light and slammed directly into the driver's side of my car. The impact was violent, sending my sedan spinning across the intersection like a toy. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, 3 days later, in a haze of pain. My right femur was shattered, 2 ribs were broken, and I had a concussion that kept me dizzy for weeks. Dr. Michael Harrison, the orthopedic surgeon who pieced my leg back together, was a man in his late 40s with a calm demeanor and the kind of steady hands you'd trust with your life. The surgery was brutal, 6 hours long, implanting a titanium rod and pins to hold the bone fragments. Recovery, he told me, would be a long, painful road of months of healing and intense physical therapy. The pain medication barely touched the agony that pulsed through my leg with every tiny movement. My sister, Olivia, had always been our family's golden child. She married David Miller, a corporate lawyer pulling in a 6-figure salary. They lived in a sprawling suburban house with their twin daughters, Chloe and Emma. Olivia never missed an opportunity to remind everyone how successful she was. Every family gathering became her personal stage, showcasing her perfect life. Me? I was a graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm. The pay was decent, but it was nowhere near David's income. I lived in a modest downtown apartment and drove a used Honda that had seen better days. Mom and Dad always seemed a little disappointed I hadn't achieved Olivia's level of success, often making comments about my career choices and wondering aloud when I'd settled down with someone respectable. After the incident, everything completely unraveled. I couldn't work. I couldn't drive. I could barely make it to the bathroom without help. My insurance covered most of the medical bills, but the co-pays and deductibles drained my savings account at an alarming rate. My company put me on short-term disability, meaning I was living on 60% of an already modest salary. Olivia offered to let me stay with them during my recovery. At first, the idea made my stomach churn. The thought of depending on her? No thanks. But my apartment was on the 3rd floor, no elevator, and navigating stairs on crutches was impossible. Dr. Harrison strongly advised against it. So, I swallowed my pride, a bitter pill, and accepted her offer. The first week was tolerable. Olivia set me up in their 1st-floor guest bedroom, brought me meals, and even helped me shower. David was polite but distant, clearly uncomfortable with a houseguest who needed constant assistance. Chloe and Emma, the twins, were sweet, drawing pictures to cheer me up and offering to fetch things. By the 2nd week, the cracks started to show. Olivia began making passive-aggressive comments about how long my recovery was taking. She'd sigh loudly when she had to help me, as if my injury was just a massive inconvenience she was graciously tolerating. David started working later, avoiding the house until after dinner. One night, I overheard them arguing about how much longer I'd be staying. Month 2 was when things got truly ugly. Olivia stopped bringing me meals regularly. She'd forget to pick up my prescriptions. When I asked for help, she'd snap that she wasn't my personal nurse and I needed to start doing more for myself. Dr. Harrison had been clear, no weight on the leg yet. Olivia dismissed his instructions as overly cautious. Mom and Dad visited once during those first 2 months. They spent most of their time praising Olivia for being such a devoted sister and suggesting I should be more grateful. Dad even made a comment about me needing to be more careful on the road, implying the incident was somehow my fault. Mom just fussed over the twins and showed off photos of Olivia's latest vacation to anyone who would listen. Physical therapy started in month 3. 3 times a week, David drove me to the clinic, where a therapist named Lisa put me through exercises that left me sweating and fighting back tears. Progress was excruciatingly slow. Some days, it felt like I'd never walk normally again. Dr. Harrison assured me I was healing well, but the timeline stretched ahead like an endless road. Lisa's sessions were brutal. Leg lifts with resistance bands, each repetition sending fire through my thigh. Stretches that should have been simple left me gasping. Balance exercises on a foam pad made me feel like a toddler. Other patients moved through their routines with relative ease, their injuries seemingly less severe. I watched a man with knee surgery graduate while I still struggled with basic movements. David's resentment grew with each drive. He'd check his watch repeatedly in the waiting room, sighing when my session ran long. One day, he complained that these appointments interfered with his work, suggesting I find alternative transportation. When I pointed out I couldn't drive, he muttered something about ride-sharing services and fell silent for the rest of the trip. My work had sent flowers during the first month, a cheerful arrangement. By month 3, communication dwindled to occasional emails from my supervisor, asking when I might return. My disability payments covered rent and basic expenses, but nothing was left over. I stopped buying anything non-essential. My wardrobe consisted of the same 3 outfits that were easy to put on with limited mobility. The isolation was crushing. Friends from work initially texted often, but as weeks turned into months, the messages became less frequent. They had lives to live, careers advancing, weekend plans that didn't include visiting someone who could barely leave the house. I understood, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. Some evenings, I'd scroll through social media, watching everyone else's lives continue while mine remained frozen. Olivia's patience had completely evaporated by this point. She started accusing me of milking my injury for sympathy, making comments about how convenient it was that I got to lounge around all day while she worked and took care of her family. I tried explaining I was doing everything Dr. Harrison recommended, but she'd just roll her eyes and change the subject. The breaking point came in early August, 5 months after the incident. Olivia decided to throw a huge barbecue for Dad's 65th birthday. She invited everyone, Mom and Dad, of course, plus Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark, my cousins Jason and Maya, with their spouses and kids. It was a massive production with catered food and a rented bouncy castle. Mom had insisted on inviting Dr. Harrison. She'd met him during one of my follow-up appointments and was impressed by his thoroughness. In her mind, inviting him was a gesture of gratitude for saving my leg. She'd mentioned it a week before the party, and I was mortified at the thought of my surgeon seeing me in a social setting. Dr. Harrison apparently accepted out of politeness, telling Mom he'd stop by briefly if his schedule allowed. I offered to help with preparations, but Olivia just told me to stay out of the way. I spent the morning in my room, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting through the window. Around noon, Olivia knocked on my door and told me everyone was asking for me. I should come outside and be social instead of hiding away like an invalid. Getting dressed was a challenge. I managed to pull on a sundress and brush my hair into something presentable. I grabbed my crutches and made my way slowly through the house. The backyard was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in months. They all turned to stare as I hobbled through the sliding glass door. Dad was manning the grill, flipping burgers with theatrical flair. Mom sat at the patio table with Jessica, both sipping wine and laughing at something on Mom's phone. The kids were screaming in the bouncy castle while the adults clustered in small groups, drinks in hand. Olivia spotted me immediately. She was near the drink cooler with David and Jason. Her expression darkened as I approached. I tried to smile and greet everyone, but my voice came out weak and uncertain. The pain in my leg was worse than usual. I'd overdone it in physical therapy the day before. "Look who finally decided to join us," Olivia announced, loud enough for half the yard to hear. Several heads turned. "We were starting to think you'd forgotten what fresh air looks like." I forced a laugh, trying to play along with what I hoped was just awkward humor. "Yeah, it feels good to be outside. Thanks for inviting everyone, Liv. The yard looks amazing." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. You know what would be even more amazing? If you could actually contribute something instead of just taking up space in my house. The conversation around us died. Maya stopped mid-sentence. Even the kids seemed to sense the tension and quieted down. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment. I'm doing everything I can, I said quietly. Dr. Harrison says I'm making good progress. Olivia laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Dr. Harrison, you throw that name around like he's some kind of wizard. Maybe if you actually pushed yourself instead of using him as an excuse, you'd be walking by now. David shifted uncomfortably beside her. Liv, maybe we should. No, David. I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. She's been living here for 5 months rent-free, eating our food, using our utilities. And for what? So she can hobble around on those crutches, feeling sorry for herself? My hands tightened on the crutch grips. I offered to pay rent. You told me not to worry about it. Because I thought you'd be gone in a few weeks, not half a year. Olivia's voice rose with each word. You're not even trying to get better. You just want someone to take care of you because you can't handle being an adult. Mom stood up from the patio table. Olivia, that's enough. But Olivia wasn't listening. She took another step toward me, her face flushed with anger. You know what I think? I think you're exaggerating how bad it is. I think you're milking this injury because it's easier than going back to your mediocre job in your tiny apartment. That's not true. My voice cracked. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I got hit by a truck, Olivia. I almost died. Almost doesn't count. You're fine now. You just don't want to be. The other guests had formed a loose circle around us, watching the spectacle unfold. I saw pity in some faces, discomfort in others. Jason was filming on his phone, probably planning to share this drama later. Maya covered her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking with suppressed giggles. Uncle Mark let out a surprised chuckle before catching himself. Stop faking it, Olivia said, her voice dropping to something cold and measured. You're just leeching off us because you have nowhere else to go and nothing better to do. Before I could respond, she reached out and grabbed my left crutch. She yanked it hard, pulling it from under my arm. I stumbled, trying to maintain balance on my good leg, but the sudden shift in weight was too much. My right leg buckled, and I fell forward, landing hard on my knees. Pain exploded through my injured femur. I cried out, unable to stop the sound from escaping. The impact sent shockwaves up my spine. I heard the crutch clatter on the concrete patio where Olivia had thrown it. Someone gasped, but then, impossibly, I heard laughter. Not from everyone, but enough. Jason was definitely laughing, his phone still trained on me. Maya covered her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking. Uncle Mark let out another surprised chuckle before catching himself. I tried to push myself up, but my arms were shaking. The pain in my leg was blinding. I felt tears streaming down my face now, hot and humiliating. I was on all fours on my sister's patio like an animal, while my family watched, and some of them laughed. Get up, Olivia said flatly. You're making a scene. I can't. The words came out as a sob. You hurt me. I need my crutch. Oh, for God's sake. Olivia turned to David. See what I mean? This is what I've been dealing with. Pure manipulation. That's when I heard a voice I didn't expect. Deep, authoritative, and absolutely furious. What the hell is going on here? Everyone turned toward the side gate. Dr. Michael Harrison stood there in casual clothes, a gift bag in one hand. His eyes swept the scene, taking in my position on the ground, the scattered crutches, and the circle of spectators. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding to rage in the span of seconds. He walked directly to Olivia and placed his hand on her shoulder. She jumped at the contact, spinning to face him. He leaned in slightly, his voice carrying across the silent yard. "You just assaulted my patient." Those 6 words fell like stones into water. The ripples of their impact spread outward through the gathered crowd. Jason's phone lowered. Maya's smile vanished. Uncle Mark took a step backward as if distance could erase his earlier laughter. Olivia's face went pale. "I didn't. I watched you rip that crutch away from her." Dr. Harrison's voice was perfectly controlled, which somehow made it more terrifying. "I watched her fall. I heard people laugh. And now I'm going to explain exactly what you've done." He released Olivia's shoulder and moved to where I was still struggling on the ground. He knelt beside me with practiced ease, his hands gentle as he assessed my condition. "Can you tell me where it hurts?" "My leg," I managed through tears. "The femur. It's bad." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I need to examine you properly. Don't move yet." He stood and addressed the crowd, his eyes landing on each person in turn. "Does anyone here have medical training? Anyone at all?" Silence. Mom and Jessica exchanged worried glances. Dad had abandoned the grill and was staring at Dr. Harrison like he couldn't quite process what was happening. "I'm Dr. Michael Harrison. I'm an orthopedic surgeon at Mercy General Hospital. 5 months ago, this woman was in a catastrophic car accident. Her right femur was shattered into 11 separate pieces. The bone fragments lacerated muscle tissue and came within millimeters of severing her femoral artery. If that had happened, she would have bled out before the ambulance arrived." He paused, letting the information sink in. Olivia had backed up against David, her earlier confidence evaporating. "I spent 6 hours in surgery reconstructing her leg. I used a titanium rod, 8 pins, and 4 plates. The procedure was complicated by significant bone loss. For the first 2 weeks, we weren't sure if we'd be able to save the leg at all. Amputation was a real possibility." Mom made a small sound of distress. I'd never told them it had been that serious. The doctors had discussed it with me privately, but I downplayed the severity to my family, not wanting them to worry. Or maybe, I realize now, not wanting to give them ammunition to claim I was being dramatic. Dr. Harrison continued, his voice growing harder. "Recovery for this type of injury typically takes 6 to 12 months. She's currently at month 5. Her progress has been excellent, better than expected, actually, considering the extent of the damage. But the bone is still healing. The hardware is still settling. Weight bearing is carefully controlled to prevent complications." He crouched beside me again. "I need to get you to the hospital for x-rays. That fall may have caused serious damage. But first, I want everyone here to understand something." He looked up at Olivia. "When you pulled that crutch away, you didn't just cause her to fall. You potentially undid months of healing. You may have shifted the hardware. You could have refractured the bone." "I didn't mean to." Olivia started. "You told her to stop faking it." Dr. Harrison's interruption was sharp. "You accused her of exaggerating. You implied she was lying about her injury, and then you physically removed her medical equipment and caused her to fall. That's not an accident. That's assault." Dad finally found his voice. "Now wait just a minute. This is a family matter." Dr. Harrison stood to his full, impressive height. This became a medical matter the moment she hit that ground. It became a legal matter when someone assaulted a patient under my care. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance, and then I'm filing a report." "You can't do that." Olivia's voice rose to a near shriek. "She's my sister. This is my house. Watch me." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur. Dr. Harrison called 911 and explained the situation with clinical precision. He then called someone else, a colleague I gathered, and asked them to meet us at the hospital. He stayed beside me the entire time, monitoring my vitals and keeping me as comfortable as possible on the ground. Mom tried to approach several times, but Dr. Harrison warned her to keep her distance. When she protested, he pointed out that she'd sat there and let it happen. Dad attempted to defend Olivia, claiming she hadn't meant any harm. Dr. Harrison shut him down with a look. The ambulance arrived quickly. The EMTs were people Dr. Harrison clearly knew. He briefed them efficiently while they prepared a stretcher. One of them, a woman named Rebecca, was incredibly gentle as they moved me. Every movement sent fresh pain through my leg, but Rebecca talked me through it, her voice soothing. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I heard Dr. Harrison speaking to Olivia. His voice was low, meant for her ears alone, but I caught fragments: lawyers, documentation, consequences. Olivia's face had gone from pale to gray. Dr. Harrison rode with me to the hospital. He held my hand during the transfer, his presence somehow making everything feel less terrifying. At the hospital, I was taken immediately to radiology. The X-rays took forever, each position sending fresh agony through my leg. When the images came back, Dr. Harrison's expression was grim. He showed me the screen, pointing out areas I couldn't fully comprehend. "You see here, this is a hairline fracture in the cortical bone. It's new. And here, one of the pins has shifted slightly. It's not catastrophic, but it's serious." My heart sank. "What does that mean?" "It means you're looking at another surgery. Minor one, thankfully. I need to realign that pin and stabilize the fracture site. You'll need to be non-weight bearing again for at least 4 weeks, followed by another 8 to 12 weeks of careful physical therapy." I felt tears welling up again. 5 months of progress, potentially erased because my sister had decided I was faking. How long until I can walk normally? Honestly, add another 3 to 4 months to your original timeline. You're looking at Christmas, maybe New Year's before you're back to baseline. He sat down in the chair beside my hospital bed. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. It's not your fault." "No," he agreed. "It's not. And that's important to remember. This setback is the direct result of someone else's actions. Actions that were frankly inexcusable." Over the next few days, the full scope of what happened began to unfold. Dr. Harrison had indeed filed a police report. 2 officers came to take my statement while I was still in the hospital recovering from the second surgery. They were professional and thorough, asking detailed questions about the incident and my living situation. The surgery went well. Dr. Harrison managed to realign the pin and stabilize the fracture without major complications, but the recovery started over. I was back to square one with weight-bearing restrictions and pain management. The hospital social worker, a kind woman named Brenda, helped me figure out my next steps. I couldn't return to Olivia's house, obviously. But my apartment was still inaccessible, and I had no savings left to hire help. Brenda connected me with a temporary housing program for people recovering from major injuries. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean and on the ground floor. Jason's video predictably went viral. Not in the way he'd hoped. Someone had posted it to Reddit with the title, "Family Laughs as Injured Woman Falls." The internet detectives did their thing, identifying Olivia and David. Within 48 hours, their social media accounts were flooded with comments. David's law firm was bombarded with calls. Someone even started a GoFundMe for my medical expenses without my knowledge or permission. Mom called me 3 days after the incident. She was crying, apologizing, saying she didn't realize how serious my injury was. She'd been so focused on supporting Olivia that she hadn't stopped to consider what I was actually going through. Dad sent a stiff text message saying he hoped I was feeling better. Olivia didn't contact me at all. The district attorney's office got involved. Apparently, the video evidence, combined with Dr. Harrison's testimony and the medical documentation, made it a straightforward case. Olivia was charged with assault and battery. David hired an expensive defense attorney who tried to argue it was a family disagreement blown out of proportion. The legal process dragged on for months. There were depositions, evidence submissions, and countless meetings with prosecutors. I had to relive that day repeatedly, describing the fall, the pain, the laughter. Each retelling opened the wound fresh. The defense attorney was particularly aggressive during my deposition, trying to paint me as someone who'd been difficult to live with, who'd overstayed my welcome. He asked pointed questions about my finances, implying I'd been taking advantage of Olivia's generosity. My own attorney, a sharp woman named Laura Thompson, shut down those lines of questioning efficiently. She prepared me well, coaching me to stick to facts and not let emotions derail my testimony. Laura had taken my case pro bono after seeing the video, telling me she had a sister herself and couldn't imagine treating her that way. The preliminary hearings were attended by several family members. Jessica came to support me, sitting in the gallery with a grim expression. Mom and Dad showed up, but sat on Olivia's side of the courtroom, their loyalty still divided despite everything. Seeing them there, watching them choose Olivia even after witnessing what she'd done, hurt worse than the actual fall had. The media picked up the story thanks to Jason's viral video. Local news stations ran segments about family conflict and wrongdoing. Though I wasn't elderly, some reporter got my name and started calling my phone, leaving voicemails requesting interviews. I ignored them all. Laura advised me to stay silent publicly, to let the legal system work, but the attention was suffocating. Neighbors I'd never met recognized me from the news coverage. The grocery store cashier gave me pitying looks. Dr. Harrison provided expert testimony about the severity of my injuries and the impact of Olivia's actions. He brought the x-rays, the surgical reports, everything. The defense attorney tried to suggest I was partially responsible for being unstable on my crutches. Dr. Harrison demolished that argument with a kind of precision that comes from years of medical training. The case never went to trial. Olivia's attorney convinced her to accept a plea deal. She was sentenced to a year of probation, community service, and required to pay restitution for my additional medical expenses. The amount was substantial. David was furious about the financial impact. I heard through Mom that they were having serious marital problems. The family fractured in the aftermath. Jessica and Uncle Mark stopped speaking to my parents, disgusted by how they treated me. Jason's wife divorced him, citing the video and his cavalier attitude toward family as contributing factors. Maya issued a public apology on social media that seemed more concerned with her own image than genuine remorse. Mom and Dad tried to rebuild a relationship with me. It was slow and awkward. They'd spent so many years putting Olivia on a pedestal that adjusting to reality was difficult for them. Mom came to visit me at the temporary housing once a week, bringing groceries and helping with household tasks. Dad maintained his distance, uncomfortable with the whole situation. My employer had been understanding about the extended medical leave, but there were limits. After the second surgery, I had to accept that returning to my old position wasn't feasible. I shifted to freelance work, doing graphic design projects from home. It paid less, but the flexibility was essential during recovery. Physical therapy started again from scratch. A new therapist named Ethan worked with me 3 times a week. He was tougher than Lisa had been, pushing me harder, but always staying within the boundaries. Dr. Harrison said progress was measured in millimeters. Some days I wanted to quit. Ethan wouldn't let me. The temporary housing facility became my world for months. It was a converted apartment complex specifically designed for people recovering from major injuries or surgeries. My neighbors included a woman recovering from a stroke, a man who had lost his leg in a construction accident, and an elderly couple who both needed hip replacements. We formed an unlikely support group, sharing meals in the common room and encouraging each other through bad days. There was something oddly comforting about being surrounded by people who understood. Nobody questioned why I needed extra time to walk to the mailbox. Nobody suggested I was exaggerating when the pain was visible on my face. The stroke survivor, a woman named Eleanor, became something of a friend. She'd bring me soup on days when cooking felt impossible. I'd help her with crossword puzzles when her memory frustrated her. The GoFundMe that strangers had started raised more than $30,000. I cried when I saw the total, overwhelmed by the kindness of people who owed me nothing. The comments were filled with messages of support, stories from others who had been betrayed by family, and furious condemnations of Olivia's behavior. Some donors were clearly motivated by outrage at the video, but others seemed genuinely moved by my situation. That money became a lifeline. It covered the medical expenses that insurance denied, paid for modifications to make my temporary apartment more accessible, and gave me a financial cushion while my freelance income grew. I hired a part-time assistant to help with household tasks I still couldn't manage. A college student named Grace came 3 times a week to grocery shop, clean, and run errands. She treated me with casual kindness, chatting about her classes while folding laundry, never making me feel like a burden. Dr. Harrison checked on me regularly, more than strictly necessary for a surgeon. We developed an unlikely friendship. He'd stop by during his rounds if I had to come in for checkups, asking about my progress, and offering encouragement. He admitted later that my case had affected him more than most. Seeing a patient attacked for having a legitimate injury had struck a nerve. Months passed, fall arrived, then winter. I graduated from crutches to a cane, then from a cane to walking independently, albeit with a slight limp that Dr. Harrison said might be permanent. My leg ached when the weather changed, a souvenir of the trauma it had endured. Christmas came and went. Mom invited me for dinner. Olivia wasn't there. Apparently, she and David had separated. He'd moved out in November, taking the twins. Their divorce was messy. Olivia had lost her job after the video went viral and her employer decided she was a liability. Her perfect life had crumbled. I didn't feel triumphant about it. Mostly, I felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that my own sister had valued her pride more than my well-being. Sad that our family would never be what it once was, however flawed that had been. In January, almost a year after the incident, I had my final appointment with Dr. Harrison. He examined my leg carefully, reviewed my range of motion, and declared me officially healed. The hardware would stay in permanently, but I was cleared for normal activities. "How does it feel?" he asked as I walked back and forth across his office. "Strange," I admitted. "I almost can't remember what normal felt like before all this." He nodded thoughtfully. "Trauma changes us. Physical trauma, emotional trauma. You're not the same person who got hit by that truck. Is that a bad thing? Depends. Are you stronger now? Weaker? Different doesn't have to mean worse." I considered the question. I'd lost my savings, my apartment, my relationship with most of my family. I'd gained independence, resilience, and a clearer sense of who really mattered in my life. I think I'm different in ways I'm still figuring out. That's honest. I appreciate that. He closed my file. "You're officially discharged from my care, but if you ever need anything, if that leg gives you trouble, you call me directly." Understood? Understood. Thank you, Dr. Harrison. For everything. Not just the medical stuff, but, standing up for me when no one else did. He smiled, the first genuinely warm expression I'd seen from him. Someone had to. I'm glad I happened to be there. As I left his office that day, walking on my own 2 legs without assistance, I thought about Olivia. About the moment she'd grabbed that crutch and sealed both our fates. She wanted to expose me as a faker, to prove I was exaggerating my injury for sympathy. Instead, she'd exposed herself. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd accused me of leeching, of taking advantage, of being weak. But in the end, her cruelty had revealed who was truly fragile. Her perfect facade had shattered as completely as my femur had. I moved into a new apartment in February, ground floor with accessible features. My freelance business was growing steadily. I'd picked up several regular clients and was making almost as much as I had at my old job. The flexibility suited me better than I'd expected. Mom and I had developed a cautious new relationship built on honesty rather than the old patterns of favoritism and disappointment. She'd started therapy to work through her own issues with how she'd treated her children. Dad remained distant, unable or unwilling to confront his role in the family dynamics. Olivia sent me a letter in March. Not an apology exactly, but an acknowledgement. She wrote about losing everything: her marriage, her job, her reputation. She claimed to understand now what she'd done, though I wasn't sure I believed her. She asked if we could talk sometime, maybe rebuild our relationship. I hadn't responded yet. I wasn't sure I ever would. The video eventually faded from viral status, replaced by the next scandal, the next outrage. But it lived forever in the dark corners of the internet, a permanent record of the moment my family's dysfunction was exposed to the world. Sometimes I wondered if Chloe and Emma would see it someday, what they'd think of their mother. Dr. Harrison called me in April to check in. We'd maintained occasional contact, friendly but professional. He asked how I was doing, if the leg was holding up. I told him about my new apartment, my growing business. He seemed genuinely pleased. You know, he said toward the end of the call, I've been practicing medicine for 23 years. I've seen a lot of terrible things happen to good people, but I've rarely seen someone handle adversity with as much grace as you did. I didn't feel very graceful. I cried a lot. Grace isn't about not crying. It's about getting back up. And you did that. Literally and figuratively. After we hung up, I sat on my couch looking out at the street below. Spring was arriving, trees budding with new growth. I thought about getting back up, about what that really meant. It wasn't just about walking again. It was about choosing to move forward when every instinct screamed to give up. Olivia had tried to break me that day on her patio. She wanted to prove I was weak, to justify her resentment. What she'd actually done was show me exactly how strong I'd become. 5 months of pain, of depending on someone who resented every moment of it, of being dismissed and doubted and diminished. And I'd survived it. I kept going to physical therapy. I'd followed Dr. Harrison's instructions. I'd done the work even when it hurt. The fall had been humiliating. The laughter had been devastating. But that moment when Dr. Harrison stepped forward. When he spoke those 6 words, everything changed. Not just for me, but for everyone there. In an instant, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the leech, the faker, the burden. I was a victim of assault. And Olivia wasn't the martyr, the long-suffering sister, the gracious host. She was an attacker. Truth has a way of asserting itself, given the opportunity. Dr. Harrison had provided that opportunity. His presence, his authority, his willingness to speak up had given my truth the weight it needed. Without him, it would have been my word against Olivia's, and the family had already shown whose side they'd choose. I still limped when I was tired. The scar from the surgical incisions was a thick line down my thigh, impossible to hide in shorts or a swimsuit. I'd probably always have some level of chronic pain, but I was walking. I was working. I was building a life that didn't depend on anyone's approval or support. In June, I saw Olivia at a grocery store. We locked eyes across the produce section. She looked older, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with age. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. After a moment, she turned and walked away. I didn't follow her. I didn't call out. I selected my apples and continued shopping. Some wounds heal, others leave scars that never quite fade. The trick is learning to live with both, to carry the weight of what happened without letting it crush you. The story could have ended differently. If Dr. Harrison hadn't shown up when he did. If Jason hadn't filmed the incident, if the video hadn't gone viral. So many small pivots that could have left me isolated and doubted, still dependent on a sister who despised me. But that's not what happened. The truth came out in the most public, undeniable way possible. And while the cost was high, a fractured family, a reset recovery, months of additional pain, there was something freeing about it, too. No more pretending. No more making myself small to accommodate other people's narratives. I learned who I could count on. Dr. Harrison, Ethan the physical therapist, Brenda the social worker, Rebecca the EMT, a network of professionals who'd shown up when my family failed. And in their professionalism, I found more genuine care than in years of obligatory family gatherings. The incident took my mobility temporarily and my innocence permanently. I'd always believed that family meant unconditional support. That blood ties guaranteed loyalty. Olivia taught me otherwise. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most. And sometimes strangers show more compassion than those who've known you your whole life. As summer arrived and I marked a full year since the barbecue incident, I realized I'd stopped waiting for an apology from Olivia. I'd stopped hoping for my old life back. I'd stopped measuring my worth by my family's approval. I was simply living, moving forward one day at a time, building something new from the rubble. The titanium rod in my femur was permanent. So were the pins and plates. I carried Dr. Harrison's work inside me every day. A reminder that sometimes the right person shows up at exactly the right moment. That 6 words can change everything. That's standing up for the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it fractures families and destroys reputations, is worth it. I never did respond to Olivia's letter. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday she'll find the courage to offer a real apology, not just an acknowledgement. Maybe someday I'll be ready to hear it. But for now, I'm focused on walking forward one step at a time, grateful for the strength in my healed leg and the clarity in my opened eyes. What would you have done in that moment?